Last fall, my girlfriend and I decided to take a weekend getaway. Things between us had been rocky for a while. Lots of small arguments that built up over nothing. We figured a change of scenery might help. Somewhere quiet, just us. We found an Airbnb in a small mountain town. It was advertised as a private lower level of a host's home, technically a basement apartment with a separate entrance. It looked cozy in the pictures. Wood-paneled walls, a fireplace, and a little kitchenette. Exactly the kind of place where you could pretend the outside world didn't exist. We booked it without thinking twice. When we arrived, Janet, the host, greeted us outside. She was in her late 50s, thin, with short curly hair and a bright pink sweater. The kind of woman who smiled too hard. Like she was trying to sell you something you weren't sure you wanted. She showed us the path down to the side entrance and gave a little awkward laugh as she handed me the key. It gets quiet down there. Hope you two like peace and quiet. There was something odd about how she said it. Like a warning dressed up as a joke. The apartment was fine, smaller than the pictures made it seem. Darker too. It smelled faintly of lavender and something heavier underneath, like damp carpet that had been doused in air freshener. There were old oil paintings of mountains on the walls and a slightly slanted coffee table. The bedroom was tucked in the back corner, no windows except a small one near the ceiling, level with the lawn outside. Still, it wasn't bad enough to make a fuss. We unpacked and tried to settle in. That first night, we made dinner, had a couple of drinks, and watched a movie. For the first time in weeks, it felt easy between us. But around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to a strange sound. At first I thought it was rain, then I realized it was footsteps directly above us. Slow, deliberate pacing from one end of the house to the other. I figured Janet was just up late. Maybe she couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to her move back and forth, and eventually drifted back to sleep. The next morning, my girlfriend seemed off. She said she kept hearing whispering during the night, soft, almost like a conversation right above the bed. I hadn't heard anything except the footsteps, but seeing how rattled she was, I promised to leave the fan on that night for background noise. We went into town that afternoon, browsed antique shops, grabbed lunch. It should have been nice, but halfway through the day, we got into a stupid argument about a parking meter of all things. It spiraled faster than it should have. She accused me of not caring. I snapped back that she was always looking for something to be mad about. People stared. We ended up sitting in silence for the entire drive back to the Airbnb. That night, the atmosphere was different. Heavier. We barely spoke as we made dinner. Every small noise, a creak, a gust of wind outside, made us flinch. Around midnight, as I was scrolling through my phone, something caught my eye. I opened the Airbnb listing again, just out of boredom, and noticed something strange. The host description had changed. Where it used to say perfect for couples retreats, it now read, for single guests only. No couples. I stared at it for a while, trying to figure out if I was imagining things. Maybe Janet changed it for future bookings? But it unsettled me. Around 3:15 a.m., I woke up again. This time, it wasn't footsteps. It was tapping, slow, deliberate tapping against the tiny window above our bed. I sat up. The tapping stopped. I whispered my girlfriend's name. She stirred but didn't wake. Carefully, I climbed out of bed and crossed the room. I peered up at the window, using the dim light from the digital clock as a guide. There was nothing there, just the blackness of the yard outside. I turned back toward the bed and froze. The door to the apartment was open, not wide open, just cracked. I was sure I had locked it. I grabbed my phone for the flashlight and slowly crept toward the door. Every instinct screamed at me not to move, but I had to see. When I pulled the door open the rest of the way, cold air rushed in. Outside, the yard was empty. The house above was completely dark. No lights on, no sounds. I locked the door, double-checked it, and sat on the couch, heart hammering until sunrise. The next morning, I tried to tell my girlfriend. She barely listened. She was angry again, distant, accusing me of being weird and secretive about something. It felt like the place itself was seeping into us. amplifying every small resentment, every buried insecurity. I suggested we check out early. She agreed without hesitation. When we stepped outside to pack the car, I glanced back at the basement window. There were handprints on the glass, smudged, greasy, small, like a child's hands, pressed against the outside of the window pane. Neither of us said a word. We drove in silence. 2 days later, back home, I tried to look up Janet's listing again. It was gone. Her profile too. No record of the property. No reviews, no trace. It was like she had never existed. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment feels too quiet, I wonder, was Janet really living there alone? Was someone or something still staying down in that basement? And more than that, did it somehow follow us home? My wife and I rented a small detached guest house outside Tucson for a work trip she had lined up. We figured it'd be a cheap way to mix business and a little vacation time. Warm desert nights, no hotel crowds, a place to ourselves. The listing was simple: private, clean, secluded. It was behind a big ranch house, but Steve, the owner, messaged us to say he barely used the main house anymore. Just me in the desert, he joked. Sounded peaceful. When we pulled up, Steve met us outside. He was probably late 50s, wearing cargo shorts, a faded baseball cap, and a friendly but distant smile. The kind of guy who looked like he was halfway between friendly neighbor and someone who didn't want visitors. He showed us the guest house, a one-bedroom setup with a little kitchen, small sitting area, and a bathroom off to the side. Nothing fancy but clean. Functional. There was a tall, cracked fence separating the guest house yard from the desert beyond. Everything felt a little isolated, but that's what we wanted, right? That first evening, we unpacked, made dinner, and sat outside to watch the sunset. The colors stretched across the sky, pinks and oranges bleeding into purple. For a while, it felt perfect. Until we got into a stupid fight. It started with something small. She made a comment about my job situation, how maybe if I had planned better, we wouldn't have to pinch pennies on trips like this. It hit a nerve. I snapped back about her spending habits, and from there it spiraled fast. The words got meaner, sharper. It wasn't like us, at least not normally. We both stormed inside without speaking another word. The air in that little guest house felt thicker somehow after that. Around midnight, there was a knock at the door. 3 knocks, soft but firm. We both froze. She looked at me like, "Did you invite someone?" I shook my head. I crept over and peeked through the small curtain covering the door's window. No one was there, just the moonlight on the gravel driveway. Just the sagging shadows of the fence posts. We laughed it off, eventually. Maybe an animal. Maybe the wind. We went to bed around 1 a.m., still not talking much. That night, I had a dream, or thought I did, about someone tapping on the glass of the bedroom window. Not knocking, tapping, light and rhythmic, like fingernails. When I jerked awake, there was nothing there, just the steady hum of the ceiling fan. The next morning, we tried to reset. Apologies mumbled over burnt coffee. We spent the day hiking in the nearby trails, trying to pretend everything was normal. And it almost worked. Until that evening, around 9 p.m., we were sitting on the couch watching a movie when the lights flickered. Just once. Then again, then the entire place went dark for half a second before buzzing back to life. At the same moment, we both heard it. Laughter. It was faint, coming from outside the guest house. Not a full laugh, more like a dry, broken chuckle. It didn't sound like Steve, and it didn't sound friendly. I rushed outside with a flashlight, shining it across the gravel, into the brush. Nothing. No footprints, no signs anyone had been there. The main house in the distance was dark, no car in the driveway. No porch light on. When I came back inside, my wife was sitting on the floor, pale. She said she heard something while I was outside. Not just laughter, whispering under the door. She didn't catch the words, just a soft hiss of syllables, that made her skin crawl. We decided right then we were leaving in the morning. Around 2:30 a.m., something woke me. A cold draft, like the window was open. Except it wasn't. The room was closed tight, but the air smelled different. Dusty, old, sour. I turned over and saw the closet door was wide open. I could have sworn it was closed before. Inside the closet, there was an old wooden chair we hadn't noticed before, tucked into the back. Scratched into the seat of the chair were jagged words. "You don't belong here." I woke my wife up. We packed everything in 15 minutes, throwing clothes into bags without folding. When we got to the front door, we realized something else. Our shoes, the ones we left neatly by the door, had been rearranged. Not kicked around, not moved slightly. They were placed perfectly in a circle on the living room carpet, toes pointed outward. We drove through the desert night without speaking, passing shadowy cacti and lonely dirt roads. At one point, my wife looked over at me, voice trembling. "That wasn't a prank, right?" I just shook my head. I didn't have an explanation that would make her feel better. 2 days later, I checked the Airbnb listing out of curiosity. It was still up. Still 5 stars, but when I scrolled down, I found one review I hadn't noticed before, buried under dozens of positive ones. Nice place. Clean. Wish someone had warned us about the third occupant. No one had replied to it, and the listing disappeared completely a week later. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself thinking about that knock, and that laughter and the whisper under the door. I wonder if it ever really left the guest house, or if it just waits for whoever's desperate enough to stay again. Three years ago, a group of friends and I rented an old cabin through Airbnb for my birthday weekend. The listing described it as historic, cozy, and full of rustic charm. It also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that the owners lived out of state and the place had one locked storage room that guests were asked not to access. We didn't think much of it. Lots of old places had weird storage closets. There were 6 of us. Me, my girlfriend Dana, my buddy Kyle, his girlfriend Rachel, and 2 single friends, Aaron and Sam. The drive up was long and winding. One of those roads where your cell signal disappears about halfway up the mountain. By the time we reached the cabin, it was already late afternoon. It sat on a clearing surrounded by dense woods, peeling paint, creaky wooden steps, shutters that banged softly in the breeze. It looked exactly like the kind of place you'd expect a scary story to start. Inside, the place smelled faintly of old wood and damp stone. There were 3 bedrooms, a small living room with a fireplace, and a narrow kitchen. The locked storage room was at the end of a narrow hallway, a heavy oak door with an old brass handle and a rusted padlock. We joked about it the first night, naturally. Kyle made a big show of rattling the padlock and pretending to listen for ghost noises inside. It was stupid fun, at least at first. The first night passed without much happening. A few creaks and bangs from the wind, maybe. Dana said she woke up once to footsteps in the hall, but we all chalked it up to Aaron getting up to use the bathroom. No big deal. The real weirdness started the second day. It was small things at first. Rachel swore she saw someone standing at the edge of the woods that morning, just a dark shape between the trees. When she pointed it out, it was gone. Aaron misplaced his wallet and swore he left it on the kitchen counter. We eventually found it sitting neatly on the front porch. That night, we built a fire outside and had some drinks. But even with the warmth of the fire, something about the night felt wrong. The woods were too quiet. No crickets, no owls. Just heavy silence pressing in around us. At one point, while we were sitting around the fire, Dana got up to grab her phone from inside. A few minutes later, we heard the front door slam hard enough to rattle the windows. When we rushed inside, Dana was standing frozen in the hallway. The locked door at the end was slightly ajar. Just a few inches. But enough. Enough to see darkness spilling out from inside. Enough to smell something faintly sour and metallic. Dana swore she hadn't touched it, that she walked past and it was just open. Kyle and I tried to play it cool, making dumb jokes to lighten the mood. Maybe it's just a supply closet, right? Maybe it's where they hide the Wi-Fi. Nobody laughed. We pushed the door shut and left it alone. For a while. That night, none of us slept well. There were noises, knocking sounds from the walls, faint scratching coming from inside the locked door. At one point, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of whispering. It was so soft, I almost thought I was dreaming. But when I sat up, I realized Dana wasn't in bed. I found her standing barefoot in the hallway, staring at the locked door. Her hand was reaching for the handle. When I called her name, she flinched like she didn't even realize what she was doing. We slept with the bedroom door locked after that. The next morning, the tension was thick. Aaron and Sam got into a fight about something stupid, car keys, or who left the back door open. Kyle and Rachel were barely speaking. Dana wouldn't meet my eyes. It was like the place was working on us, turning small irritations into sharp, ugly anger. We decided to cut the trip short and leave the next morning. That night, we tried to keep it low-key. Watched a movie, kept the fire going late. Still, nobody really relaxed. Around midnight, while everyone was settling into bed, the power went out. Total darkness. The only light was from the fireplace, flickering low and dying. And that's when the locked door creaked open, loud enough for all of us to hear. It echoed down the hall, slow and deliberate. We all froze. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and pointed it toward the hallway. The door was open wider now, wide enough to see inside. There was no closet, no shelves, no cleaning supplies. It was an empty room, at least mostly empty. In the center of the floor, there was a small wooden chair, facing the door, and sitting in the chair was a figure, thin, pale, draped in what looked like old, tattered clothing. It didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there. I dropped the flashlight. The beam spun wildly across the walls before cutting out. In the few seconds of chaos, we all grabbed what we could and bolted out the front door. No one looked back. We drove down the mountain in silence, headlights cutting through the fog. None of us spoke until we hit the main highway and cell service returned. I checked the Airbnb listing 2 days later. Gone. The profile deleted. No trace. To this day, none of us are sure what we saw. We don't talk about it much. When we do, it's in short, nervous sentences. Like if we say too much, we might call it back. But I know what I remember. The locked door. The thing in the chair. The way it was already facing the hallway. Like it had been waiting for us. If you enjoyed these chilling tales and want more true horror stories from the shadows, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Hauntica, and tap the bell icon so you never miss what's lurking next. Your support helps keep the darkness alive and the stories coming.